Okay, the meeting is live now. You can start whenever you and Ashley are ready.
Ashley, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
Great. I would like to call to order the February 1st, 2021 meeting of the Finance and Budgeting Committee and ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Calling the roll, Mr. Miller,
Here.
Mr. Tuma,
Here.
Mr. Jones,
Here.
Mr. Gallagher,
Here.
Mr. Schron,
Here.
Ms. Brown,
Here.
Ms. Baker.
Here.
We have a quorum. Also like the record to reflect that Councilmember Sweeney is also in attendance.
That's what I like to see. Perfect attendance +1. That's great. So the next item on the agenda is public comment. Has anybody signed in for public comment?
No, Mr. Chair, no one submitted any public comment.
Okay, and the next item is the approval of the minutes from the last meeting of Finance and Budgeting Committee. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
So move, Tuma.
Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of the last Finance and Budget Committee meeting. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say nay. The ayes have it, and the minutes are approved from the last meeting. Item number 5 is matters referred to the committee. We have one item, and it's 2021-0033. I would like to ask that that be read into the record.
Resolution number 2021-0033, amending the 2020-2021 biennial operating budget for 2021 by providing for additional fiscal appropriations from the general fund and other funding sources for appropriation transfers between budget accounts and for cash transfers between budgetary funds to meet the budgetary needs of various county departments, offices, and agencies.
Okay, thank you very much. That item is before us. This is a single item. It relates to the central booking, and for purposes of discussion, I would like to ask if I could have a motion in a second.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, and there is a substitute on this, and I would like to ask Director Parfiowitz if you could please explain what the substitute does and why it's needed.
Good afternoon, Walter Parfiowitz from the Fiscal Office of Budget and Management. I'm introducing the proposed substitute resolution number R 2021-0033. This is a request for additional appropriations in the amount of $3,484,505 for the central booking project at the Justice Center. The majority of the request is for a contract amendment with GMP to provide professional design, pre-construction, and construction services for an interim comprehensive central booking facility to be located within various floors of the Justice Center and jail. I have Mike Dever, Bob Corey, Matt Reimer all on to talk more about the project and then answer some questions.
Okay, Director Dever.
Mr. Chair, unless Mike, you're going first, I was going to do an introduction of what is central booking.
Okay, please
As
proceed.
we discussed.
Okay, that would be fine.
Okay. So, Mr. Chair, as you know, Coweta County has undertaken a very ambitious effort to replace the current county jail facility. But prior to doing that, and over the many years, one of the key actions suggested by stakeholders as well as many consultants for population management and jail population reduction is the implementation of what is called a central booking process. It's a bit of a misnomer because the process includes all stakeholders in the justice system early in the process, involving the arrest and the arraignment, very key early decisions to make better and more timely decisions related to that arrest and potential release of arrestees arrestees from custody. The new jail program, which we need to create now, that program will include this integrated central booking center that is intended to bring all those stakeholders together early in the process to make informed decisions regarding the most appropriate decisions, including post-arrest, but pre-charge diversion. So if an individual is arrested, brought to the county jail, but better minds, including the booking sergeants, the public defender, the prosecutor's office, all agree that this person should have been taken to the diversion center or upcoming new diversion center, that individual can be diverted. If not, appropriate charging decisions must be made. Is this a misdemeanor? Is this a felony? What is the appropriate charge? In order to do that effectively, you need the county prosecutor, the city prosecutor, and the arresting agency all together in the same area to make these important decisions. You must make early bail decisions that are appropriate and informed by not only the stakeholders that I just mentioned, but pretrial services, both at the county and the city, must be available so that they can advise the prosecutors, the courts, what bail decisions can be made, so that they can apply to the offender the least restrictive bail and bail conditions necessary that both ensure safety as well as appearance in court. So the mission of central booking is to engage all these decision makers together and early, avoiding the current very linear criminal justice process, right? Where the offender is first encountered by the police officer, then taken to a booking sergeant, then maybe charged in Cleveland Municipal Court at the next day at a first appearance hearing, then later, 5 days later, maybe bound over to Common Pleas Court, where the county prosecutor then makes an assessment. This very linear process requiring all these steps not only slows down the process, but it undermines better decision-making for the benefit of the arrestee and the public. It also assures that the arrestees are treated fairly and with dignity and respect, consistent with county priorities for equity and fairness. That the charges, again, are appropriate, is just the right charge. Bringing the prosecutor together in the same room with the defense attorney and the charging authority will provide the opportunity for the best charging decisions. It'll make sure that indigent arrestees are assigned counsel immediately, unlike the current process, as I mentioned, which could delay a permanent assignment of counsel for indigents 7, 8, 10 days after initial arrest, breaking the opportunity for a cohesive, coherent representation of the arrestee. And where necessary, if the person has to be charged, that the bond conditions have been determined by competent pretrial services, whether at the county level or Cleveland municipal level, that they ensure that these are the least restrictive approach necessary to ensure presence in court and public safety, of course. It brings all these people together for these early, more effective decision making, including the arresting agency, the county jail, the city prosecutor, the county prosecutor, the public defender, municipal and common police court, both their agencies' pretrial services, and both county clerks all together so that these timely decisions can be made. Without central booking, you're relegated to the linear approach where arrestees continue to move through the process and the decision makers are not in a position to have timely, effective communication with each other. It is necessary to do the central booking process before a new jail for two reasons mainly. One, so that we can make better decisions immediately and as soon as possible for our arrestees and the public. And two, because by the time a new jail is in place, it would be too late to have created these very complex processes involving changes in processes, policies, and procedures for all of these stakeholders, and to get any of the kinks ironed out before we have a new jail. So with that, I'll wait for any questions, or we can move on to the more detailed finance questions.
Okay, thank you very much for that presentation, and I'll add a third reason for doing it now, which is that we want to get a good understanding of how much of a reduction in jail population we can reasonably achieve so that we can make the best and most cost-effective decision on the size of the new jail, which is currently being decided upon. I would like to mention that the $2.4 million Ozan construction contract itself is going to come before the Public Safety Committee tomorrow, and probably the focus on the mechanics of the central booking process should probably be in that committee. But I would ask if at this time anybody has any questions for Director Corey before we move on to the financial and construction aspects. Okay, hearing none, we will call upon Director Dever.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson, and thank you so much for inviting Public Works to this committee today. So I might as well go right into the construction, and I've asked Matt Reimer, my facility administrator, to really give the overview of the project and where we are right now, and a scheduled timeline and when we anticipate to have substantial completion. Matt.
Thank you, Director. Good afternoon, Councilman, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Council members. So you may recall that we presented the contract for Ozan Construction back in February of 2020, and it was that resolution, R 2020-0045, was approved on February 25th. And that resulted from a competitive request for proposal, of which we had 3 respondents, that Ozan Construction was selected, and with an initial design build contract value of $825,000. Through the course of 2020, we were able to complete all the design, planning, and programming for the central booking project, reflective of the decisions made by the Justice Center Executive Steering Committee. And so what we have before you are the overall project costs, incorporating the total construction cost proposed by Ozan Construction, as you mentioned, reflective in the amendment, under R 2021-0036 to be heard tomorrow in Chairman Gallagher's committee, as well as the supporting staffing budgets and some material budgets for the total project costs that are shown in the substitute legislation today of $3.484505 million for the total project. I'd like to break that down for you as you had requested, Mr. Chairman. The largest dollar amount on the corrected substitute legislation is $3,244,505. And that value represents the total contract value, if approved, that will be awarded to Ozan Construction, amended through amendment. That includes the $825,000 initial contract value that was approved and awarded last February of 2020. So the total contract value of the $825,000 plus the amendment costs of just over $2.4 million will equal the $3.244505 million shown in today's fiscal agenda under the other expenses line item. I'd like to break down the other 2 line items for you, and then I'll be available to answer any questions. The personal services line item of $174,000, that includes Public Works personnel salaries in support of this project for both project management, estimated to be $40,000, and trades support of various project elements of this project, as is typical on capital construction, in the estimated value of $134,000. That totals the $174,000 presented under personal services line. The capital outlays line of $66,000 is intended for materials and any material contingencies that would support the work that our county trades do in support of the project. And with that, I stand ready to answer any of your questions, Mr. Chairman or Director.
So, Mr. Reimer, one question is, why is the entire $825,000 from the initial contract included in this fiscal agenda item? I I would have expected that, that you would have to carry over whatever from that 825,000 was not spent last year and reappropriate that, but that you would not have to appropriate the entire 825,000. Can you provide some guidance on that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I can. I worked with that advanced question. I worked with our fiscal department as well as our OBM analyst and team. And the $825,000 when awarded was in a different capital public works activity. And now that we are getting to the project final amount with this guaranteed maximum price amendment, we're able to complete the entire project setup. And so the 825,000 is being transferred. Those expenses and the remaining budget amount are being adjusted into the new project setup. So that is an accounting transfer that is taking place from where the money was to where the rest of the money will be, Mr. Chairman.
Are there other questions by my colleagues?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Councilman Tuma.
All right, thank you. Mr. Reimer, as far as the personal services portion of the contract, you mentioned trade support and then public works being a part of that. Explain the public works portion of that element.
Yes, Councilman Tuma. Through the chair to Councilman Tuma. Yes, we would typically on any capital project have some level of trades support for most of our projects. We have, when we're working typically in our existing county facilities, they have to provide support for utility shutoffs, utility coordination, logistics coordination, or some ancillary work to help contractors work in our facilities. In this case, we also have our project management salaries, which are typical of any capital project. We also have some ancillary project elements associated with this project that our trades will be working through. And that's some relocation assistance to the sheriff's staffs that are displaced as part of this project, and just ongoing coordination in those various areas that Ozan Construction will not be building in, all in the Justice Center.
Okay, and if I could, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, continue.
As far as the trades go, are there individual bids that go out to the various trades, or how's that work in this particular instance?
Through the chair to Councilman Tuma, no, sir. Specifically, this budget is set up, and what typically happens, we're providing throughout Public Works employees are providing staff costing sheets every pay period, and any costing or any salary time that is attributed to this project will be approved by the foreman and our maintenance administrator, and then submitted for expense transfer to the capital project. So these are costing sheets by employee that get attributed to the project.
Okay, so I see these are internal county trade staff.
They are, Councilman. Sorry for that miscommunication.
Oh, no, okay.
Yes.
I appreciate that. All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Reimer.
Any other questions by my colleagues?
I have one question, Chair.
Ms. Baker.
So I'm just trying to understand your breakdown. The personal services, which of course is the public works salaries and the trade support for 174,000, that one line there under personal services. The other expenses, and I'm sorry if I didn't catch it, was changed to increase $128,887. What was the reason for that increase and why we need this substitute?
Through the chair to Councilwoman Baker, with apologies to council, this was a math error, simply said, for the contract value of the Ozan Construction contract. The amendment that we're presenting tomorrow to Public Safety and Justice Affairs Committee is for $2,419,505. That plus the original contract value of $825 should have been what is presented in the substitute, $3,244,505. So with apologies, it slipped by that we provided an incorrect value on the original legislation.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Any other questions by my colleagues? Okay, the first thing I'd like to ask for is if someone would be willing to make a motion that the substitute version be accepted as the version of this resolution that's before the committee.
So move.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been, motion has been made by Councilman Tron and seconded by Councilwoman Baker to accept the substitute. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Okay, the substitute version is the version that's before the committee. Now, my next question to Director Parfiowitz or to Mr. Reimer or Director Dever is as to whether it's needed that this legislation be passed on second reading suspension.
Matt, you want to answer?
Yes, Director. Mr. Chairman, for this piece of legislation, we would so request it be considered for second reading consideration. The reason why I ask for that is the effective date of the amendment that we will be presenting tomorrow to Public Safety and Justice Affairs has an effective date of February 23rd, which would be 3 readings on that legislation. I believe it'd be appropriate for this legislation to be approved prior to the council meeting, that may be considered to be adopted on the amendment. So if this could be considered for second reading, it would be appreciated.
Okay, so the original main motion that we made to put this resolution under consideration was just to move approval with a second, so it was not explicit on that point. So I would ask if someone would be willing to offer a motion to amend the resolution on the floor to include a recommendation to leadership to put this on the next council meeting for second reading suspension.
May I have a question
move, Brown.
beforehand?
Yes, I heard a couple of questions. Who?
Nan Baker.
Okay, and I think I heard Ms. Brown as well. So we'll do Councilwoman Baker first.
All right, and just a quick question. When do you expect this to be finished? And how much of the population do you expect at the jail to be reduced?
Go ahead, Matt.
Through the chair to Councilwoman Baker, the expected substantial completion date per the amendment that we're presenting tomorrow is for September 10th, 2021 for the project to be substantially complete. And I will defer to the other question. If I could defer that to Mr. Corey, I'd appreciate that.
Thank you. So it's difficult to say given the fact that the program is not currently in place. For example, one of the things that has to be determined, let's say, by the city and the county prosecutor is whether or not they're going to divert cases that are obvious felonies directly to common pleas court. And there has to be an agreement then, as part of central booking, for example, of this collaboration on charging determinations. Until we see how those decisions play out, what policy shifts that the city prosecutor, the Cleveland, for example, Cleveland City Prosecutor, Aquila Jordan makes with regard to these decisions, the county prosecutor, Mike O'Malley, makes with regard to these decisions, we won't know if we will be able to save how many jail days, because we won't know how many people have been diverted directly to, let's say, common pleas court where appropriate. One of the reasons why we want to get central booking up and running prior to as early as possible while we're still in the design phase of the jail is so that we can see exactly what impact central booking and diversion, right? Not only central booking, but and our diversion program has on that population, so that we can make best decisions about jail size. We already have a preliminary idea of the initial design, but since the design is modular, we'll depending upon how whether, let's say, diversion and central booking isn't as successful as we would like it to be, will we have to increase that modular design for more arrestees, more detainees. So that is one of the very things we want to find out through the implementation of central booking, is what exactly is that impact on jail days, as well as a diversion program.
Thank you for that. And from memory, in discussing this prior, there are 50 beds in the diversion center. Is that right?
Well, I think the design, and Bill Mason, I think, is on the call, but I think the current design would be for 50 of the mental health, 50 of the mental health in combination with drug addiction, and then 50 drug addiction beds. So more so in that regard, more than 50, but initially for sure 50.
Okay. And federal, those that are charged with a federal crime are not diverted to the diversion center. Am I right?
To the extent that we would even get those cases, and depending on whether or not the charges were reduced, whether it be by the FBI, DEA, they could be subject to reduction due to the central booking plan, where the charging authority is right there with the county prosecutor and the city prosecutor, and perhaps the three of them agree that a more appropriate local charge could divert that case to, let's say, municipal misdemeanor prosecution or common police felony, or who knows, rerouted right out to the diversion center. So I don't consider those based on my experience, I haven't seen those, but we would countenance that could be handled by the central booking process also. But if it's a true felony charge in the federal system, it would not go to our diversion center.
And one last, again, from memory, I believe the police officer who makes the arrest can make that decision at that time that that person should go to the diversion center. Does that still stand?
That is correct. The city, let's say it's the Cleveland police officer, would be trained in the program. They would have access to, let's say, frontline services for consultation on that diversion, and then they could divert themselves, with the advice and with the guidance of, let's say, frontline services right to our diversion center and never even come to the jail. I mentioned the diversion center because, as Mr. Mason points out many times, we could miss somebody that's divertible and they could be arrested, but we still, through central booking, want to take the opportunity to identify them and divert them even post-arrest, right? But prior to charging them and getting them into the judicial system, we still want to take the opportunity to divert eligible offenders back out to diversion where appropriate, where we see the mental health issues. It's not a serious violent crime. There's not a significant criminal history, and they're appropriate for our diversion program.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I appreciate it.
Councilwoman
Absolutely.
Brown.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, I have a little bit of a lag today, but I really was just making the motion. So we're good.
Okay,
Councilman.
so you're moving to amend to include the recommendation for second reading suspension, is that correct?
Yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded to amend the motion to include a recommendation for second reading suspension. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Hearing none, all those in favor?
Mr. Chairman. Gallagher,
Yes,
I missed the estimated time of build out. What date, how much was that? How many months?
September 10th, 2021 for completion.
Okay, and could I ask whoever's on the line of the stakeholders who has agreed?
So I can step forward, and we've been having weekly meetings with the stakeholder group, which includes the public defender, the county prosecutor, the common police court, the city of Cleveland, the city prosecutor, and the city Cleveland Police Department. So those are weekly meetings to work through process, and I think they've been going very well over the last few weeks. So we're still working out those details. And Bob, is there anything further we need to add to that?
No, that's a good recitation.
Okay, will they be at the meeting tomorrow?
I did not invite them, Mr. Chairman. Should we together talk after this and see if you want to invite any individuals?
I would just
I'd be
like
happy
them, I would just like them to know that we're going to be having discussions tomorrow regarding this, and I didn't want anyone to miss that opportunity.
I can do that.
Okay, thank you. Nothing
Okay. The question was on amending the resolution to include a recommendation for second reading suspension. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 I only heard a couple of ayes. I'm going to call it again, and please everybody unmute themselves. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Okay, the ayes have it. The motion is amended. Now the question is on the final passage of the resolution out of this committee as substituted with the recommendation for second reading suspension. We don't need another motion. It is before us. And any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Okay, the resolution number 2021-0033 is recommended to the full council with recommendation for second reading suspension. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're going to move on to discussion items. And the first item on our discussion list was an update on the Harris property tax system, but at Director Ryan's request, he is advised that if we were to give a couple weeks, they're in the process of working out some issues, and hopefully at that time could give us a more complete and favorable report. So we're going to hold off the presentation on the Harris system and move now to the update on the ERP. Director Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen at this point, hopefully. Hopefully that's visible to everyone.
Looks good.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Thank you for the opportunity to come before the Budget and Finance Committee again to talk about ERP and our current status. We just deal with the technology here. So I just want to provide an update on the program, specifically focus in on the payroll workforce management implementation schedule, provide an update on program finances as well. So those are the three areas that I wanted to focus on today with the committee. First of all, just on overall program status, I just wanted to put this slide up again with some slide updates here. I just want to state that up front that I'm incredibly proud of what the county team, the ERP team, the business units and departments have accomplished in the last 2.5 years since I've been associated with the program. To be in a position where we have 20 of the 23 ERP functions for phase 1 implemented under the circumstances that we've all lived with challenges, especially over this last year. This is an incredible accomplishment. So this is where we are. In the upper right-hand corner, that Galaxy badge integration system, that is almost complete. That'll be done probably in February to add another. It's not an Infor module, but it integrates with Infor modules. It's very important. So, that is where we are from an overall status standpoint with the number of things that we have completed. for the ERP program. The a program overview. This comes directly out of the most current ERP program schedule overall. We have dramatically, I guess would be the best word, spent time with the ERP schedule over the last few weeks. We've revised the percent complete. We've added a lot of detail in the plan. When you add detail in the plan, what happens is what shows as the effort complete on the right-hand side, which is the way the planning works. If you add more task or add more time, it actually reduces the percent complete that you show. Doesn't mean we didn't accomplish what we accomplished. It just means from the way the math works there. The number of tasks complete is just a straight count of tasks complete. So this is where we are overall in the program. We have, 2 major blocks of work left to do. That is payroll and workforce management is one block, and then the finishing up of the budgeting system is phase 3, typically referred to as phase 3 of budget forecasting and management is the second block that needs to be done. So that's overall task-wise where we are. So I think the last time that I was in front of the committee, we had talked about challenges in 3 areas that were causing some schedule delays. And the question is, what have we done about those? And that's on the right-hand side here. Staffing has been incredibly challenging at multiple levels, not just within the IT department, but across the board with the number of events that have taken place and lost staff turnover. So the question is, what have we done about that? HR has staffed several new positions to replace key management staff and operational staff that have turned over in their organization, and IT has backfilled some of that HR support from an IT perspective. 3 of the 4 positions that we had open for IT have been filled, and we've also been able to locate 3 1099 direct contractors that are experienced in 4 ERP contractors, and we're moving to those contracts to the Board of Control as quickly as possible. So they're in process right now. Would expect to see them in the next 2 weeks in front of Board of Control. Also in the procurement area where we've had some challenges, the procurement department has staffed up. They've added 2 additional positions, and they still have 2 open that they're looking to fill to bring that department closer to full strength as well. So all of these staffing challenges have certainly contributed to some of the things that we've seen in terms of delays. But we have taken really positive action especially over the last 4 or 5 weeks to try to get in front of some of these vacancies. Second area in terms of procurement system issues that have plagued us since we did procurement in 2 pieces. I should start by saying that. We really did purchase order processing and accounts payable as part of the first implementation, and that launch went fairly well. It took us a while to settle that down and stabilize and get everybody used to the new system. And then we added contract management and strategic sourcing, which takes contracts all the way from the initial sourcing with the RFPs all the way through the creation of a contract. And finally, once the contract is created, through the creation of purchase orders. It ties the entire process together. And that has been fairly challenging. About the time that we launched contract management was when all of the COVID stuff hit. And part of the challenge was just trying to take 130 people, many of whom saw their new laptops and were working remotely for the first time and take them through remote training, not classroom training, and launch a new system at the same time. So we did that. There's been some challenges just in getting people up to speed and training them, getting them to understand new processes. But what we have seen also is that has begun to stabilize. People are becoming more familiar with the system. Things that we have identified and resolved, there were some specific system issues that we identified and we partnered with Infor to make sure that we got those resolved, and fixes for those in most cases have been installed. There's a couple of outstanding things that had stalled contracts that we have workarounds for, but that Infor is providing development for. So we are beginning to stabilize in that system. We also have begun working with a dashboard that allows us to focus in on specific areas where people are having problems. If a contract's been sitting in a certain status for longer than a certain period of time, we know there must be a problem. We're assuming there must be a problem, and allows us to focus in on those people and their contracts. And it turns out that a lot of the issues that we have are centered around people that either have one of two things. They have very complex contracts and they're not quite sure how to proceed, or they have the other scenario is that they just need more training in the process. And it's allowed us to focus in on those folks. So that system is beginning to stabilize, and in the process, though, it's taken an incredible amount of staff time from everybody, including the ERP team that was originally dedicated pretty much solely to payroll, to take a step back and go make sure that this system is stabilized. Lastly, we wanted to make sure that we allowed enough time for training. If there's a lesson learned here out of our procurement and contract management training experience, it's that it's incredibly important that we allow not just adequate, but lots of time for communication and training with county employees to make sure that they're comfortable with what they're about to start doing that's new. And if we made a judgment error at one point, it was probably just not allowing enough time in some cases for that kind of training. Of course, COVID affected that in our ability to just reach out to people in a classroom, but still, we want to learn from that, make sure we allow enough time, especially for training 8,000 employees and 800 supervisors that are the part of those employee groups for the new payroll workforce management system. So those were some of the challenges that we face and have faced, and we are working through them. We do have solutions. We have mitigated most of these by taking positive action. So what does the plan look like? This is an overview of the plan. I would like to take in this meeting, I would like to take a little bit of a deep dive into each one of these boxes, these areas, these task groups going forward. But this is, you'll see this in various reports and briefings going forward, but this is at a high level, the steps that it takes to launch both payroll and workforce management, which is the top line, and to finish that final phase of budgeting and forecasting management for the OBM group. Right now, we show payroll as launching at the year end, going live in December with the first paycheck issued in February. So that has been the adjustment to the schedule that some members have been briefed on, that we've been working on diligently over the last few weeks to restructure the plan so that we have a very solid plan going forward. So these are all the steps that it takes to get there. So I want to talk about these one at a time. What you're looking at are actual excerpts from a Microsoft project plan for the entire program that we've maintained the plan for certainly since I've been here, and talking with the committee. The items in green are things that have been completed. Everything below the green area are things that are in process right now. So I just wanted you to be able to see that view. And the boxes on the previous chart are tied directly to these areas in blue that we'll go through in this part of the presentation. Excuse me. There's also included in future reports is a sort of a classic project flow view here. You can see that that the flow of the project from top to bottom here is matched to exactly where each phase appears on the calendar. We'll talk about this in detail as well. The official date that we start entering payroll in the new system, entering time in the new system, would be December 19th of this year. So what's the current focus? The current challenge that we have and the current focus of the team is in doing everything necessary to prepare for parallel testing. We have several parallel tests associated with payroll that we want to perform. More testing is always better. The more tests you can do, the more comfortable everybody is in the system and how to do the process and how to and the accuracy of what's being done, especially in the case of payroll. So these items right here on this part of the schedule allow us to do everything necessary before we do a production-like cutover for a full end-to-end parallel. By full end-to-end parallel, I mean doing everything from converting the data onto the system in a test environment to people doing, employees doing their time entry, to supervisors approving their employees' time entry, and then ultimately the calculation of payroll and the comparison of the output checks for a given pay period to actual legacy payroll checks to make sure that we're accurate in what we're producing. So key to that success is the onboarding of those new team members that we already have in process that I mentioned on the previous slide, and making sure that we have fiscal and procurement systems stabilized. We've worked hard to do that. We're not talking through a detailed explanation of that in this meeting. If there's any questions, we can certainly answer them. But all of these things are in process, and they're critical to us making this part of the schedule work. You'll see things in there in this part of the schedule that have to do with development and configuration of the system. Those all require that we have the right ERP team members on board. So we believe we've identified all of them. We're in the process of onboarding them. Any questions? Let me stop at this point and see if there's any questions on the schedule or where we're going before I move to the next area.
Chair, I have a question, Ann Baker.
Ms.
Yes,
Baker,
Just to confirm, when will the employees receive their first paycheck through ERP?
The first paycheck would actually be issued January the 7th, I believe.
January 7th, and that will be for 1 week in January?
No, it'll be for a normal pay period. The pay period time entry starts on, I have that further down the slide, but it starts on December the 19th. I believe it ends on January the 1st with a check issued on January the 7th.
I don't know, I guess I'm just asking for clarification. Wouldn't you want the first paycheck to be in January to cover January's expenses so that it lines with the W-2 at the end of the year? Why is it that we are going into 2020 and not beginning with 2021 in January?
Well, we actually would align with the W-2 production at the end of the year. The last date on I'm sorry, the last the pay period that starts on December the 19th would actually fall in by the fact that it's paid in January, would actually fall into the January earnings, not previous year's earnings. I didn't say that very well. Okay.
I
So it
understand.
does really align directly with that.
I do understand that. Thank you for that clarification.
We're a cash basis taxpayer, and so it's just gonna go whenever the check is actually cut, it'll get rolled into that W-2.
I understand.
Right. Okay. All right. Moving on to the next area, parallel testing is just an incredibly important piece of this. What you have shown here is the actual part of the project schedule that identifies these parallels. I'm sorry, the training. This is the training for the parallels. So we are going to sort of cut our teeth on training about 10% of the population. That's about 80 supervisors and, you know, roughly 700 or 800 people doing different kinds of time entry, a cross section, if you will, of the county. So that's, we've had to look real hard at our training approach here. We originally had a very long period identified for training, like 12 weeks, realizing that that was doing two things to us. Number one, if we actually took 12 weeks to train people, by the time we got to the end of 12 weeks, whoever we trained in week one would have had to be retrained probably in what they were doing before go live. The second piece of that, though, is that in having training that long, we would actually cut into the time that we could be doing more testing, more parallel work. And so there's a lot of reasons to compress training into probably a 4 or 5 week period, maybe 6 at the most. We've got it on a schedule that way. It's important to remember that we are in parallel testing. We are taking a cross section that of all of the employees and involve a cross section very carefully selected to make sure we cover all of the unions. And there are actually, if you really count them up, I know we've talked about this in the implementation of workforce management before, there's about 900 different combinations of pay scenarios out there because of the complexity and the number of unions that we have. So we want to make sure that we have a cross section that will exercise as many of those options or all of those options as possible. So we're doing not a random selection, but we're doing a very carefully selected slice of people to make sure that we cover all the unions and all the pay scenarios. So the training itself will be a combination of online demos, online direct training for supervisors. LMS is the learning management system that we have. It's the system that people used and signed into to take ethics training, for example, where you actually sign in and you're accountable for that training, and we can see who's taking training or who hasn't taken training. We're also planning for the supervisors to be the first line of defense or question and answers. So we want to make sure that they are thoroughly trained, not only in how to approve time, but any of the questions that might arise on how to enter time in the system. We'll have labs available that will be running to assist supervisors, and we'll be running a hotline, war room kind of environment to handle questions. So all of these things will be exercised during our training for parallel testing, and then we'll use our experience from that to adjust the larger population when we do the full training for everybody. So that's what we're doing to organize the training part. The actual parallel strategy, what you're looking at in this slide right here, is the actual pay period start date, the date that we start entering time for each of the pay periods selected for these parallels. So we have 4 parallels in the schedule right now. I would say that the timing for these parallels, when you look at this and you say, my gosh, how come we have so much time between some of these sections? We were very conservative kind of worst case timing is what we put into the schedule at this point. In taking this approach to make sure we had adequate time to not only do the parallel, analyze the results, see if there's anything we need to adjust, and then do it again. So the timing includes, you can see in the little, may not be able to read it on the screen here, the little green lines between each one of them, about 2 weeks between each one of the parallels. We may be able to, if we do well, we always have the option of trying to be able to fit another parallel in. More testing is always better, especially in a payroll environment. So but that's the way we have taken the parallel schedule at this point in time. So it's a pretty extensive testing schedule, even as is. I say the fourth parallel is optional. We really would like to put that in. 3 was considered the minimum by the team. The fourth one would be ideal. If we have any problems in the first 3 that would eat into that schedule, we could do it with 3. We'd really prefer 4. And if we do really well, we can fit another one in and possibly do 5. So we've allowed some time in the schedule for problem solving and resolution here that's pretty conservative. Any questions on parallel testing? Okay.
Jeff, if I may, on that parallel testing.
Yes, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. So with that intense parallel testing that takes us through pretty much the entire year, if we go through all 4 phases, how are we ever going to have this payroll wrapped up end of last year or even in April? And I understand the lack of employees and the pandemic certainly, but we're talking about testing. How are we ever going to test within the period of time that we had before this and think that we could get payroll done, even if we didn't have the pandemic and HR issues? It's hard to understand in those. I mean, we're testing all the way through September of this year, and we thought we would have payroll up and running by April and perhaps even October. How can you explain how we were going to make sure that payroll was adequately in place in order to even think about having it done earlier this year?
I would have to say this, that in every case, and I know we've rescheduled this several times, in every single case where we've put a payroll schedule together, we had every reason to believe that we would have been able to make the schedule. And we had, including some parallel testing, and I'll explain the difference in approach to parallel testing in just a minute, but there was never a case where we didn't think we'd make the schedule and then put the schedule out. So we always believed that it was achievable. We did have, as you mentioned, we did have some significant things happen in each case, unfortunately, that whether it was turnover, whether it was COVID, we just had unexplained, unpredictable things happen that caused a delay. If I was to go back, and I could always do that, and look at some of those schedules, we did have adequate time for parallel testing in those. We were taking more time here. Our original parallel testing approach was going to be to try to automate that parallel testing process, which in some cases you can do that. Part of the lessons, automate it meaning you could actually take output from the legacy payroll system, load it into the new system, run payroll, compare the results, and say, we're good, right? The better approach, because of the complexity of what we're doing, I think we've changed the approach to fully involve supervisors and employees all the way through the process. I think it's based on our lessons learned from doing the other implementations. The more we have people involved, the more we communicate, I think the better our chances for success. I don't necessarily think we accounted for that properly in the first rounds. Not that we couldn't have still gone live if we hadn't had unforeseen circumstances, but I think we're taking a more broader approach, I guess is the best way I would put it, to involving a large segment of the employee population through the entire process. So we have changed the approach a bit.
If I may follow, and I understand what you're saying, if from the outside looking in, someone who, and as yourself, is experienced in ERP programs, would you have said from the beginning, and like I said, I understand the HR issues and pandemic, would you have said that in order to install a payroll system on ERP, you are going to need a year? You're going to need from January to cutting the first check the following January in order to succeed in a county like our size. Is that something that perhaps, is that unusual that we would be waiting this long through this much testing, given the circumstances, of course? It just seems like a long time to be putting payroll through the system.
No, actually, the payroll schedules that we had initially would have taken a year. Just not this additional year at this point, given the delays that we've had. So no, I would not say it's unusual to take a year at all. It's just that the way that this has fallen with our delays, it's just the ideal way, or the best way for the county to do this. The best benefit for the county is to do this at year end and take the right time to keep employees involved throughout the entire process, I think. So looking at those original schedules, we had about a year involved in beginning to end, but the delays caused us to make this push.
Okay. All right,
Yes,
Jack,
ma'am.
thank you. Appreciate it.
Mr.
Chairman?
Other questions? Yes, sir.
Councilman Tron.
Yeah, it was only 6 months ago that we had been told by you that we were going to go live with payroll come the end of first quarter of 2021. And there was even a suggestion that we all said with some acceleration that we could potentially go live by 12/31 of 2020. And you acknowledged that that would take some aggressive approach, but you were going to keep looking at it. And now here we are. We're not even close to the first quarter. We're obviously 3 more quarters on top of that. What is the key thing that caused us in just those few months to actually add from when you were talking about that, literally 18 months from the time you were telling us to where we're going to go live on this thing? Because now you were telling us in the summer that it was going to go live and in the first quarter. And now we're looking at in that length of time, we're not going to have a live date until January of your first paycheck is going to be that first week in January of 2022. I mean, what is the biggest intervening event? Give me one big intervening event that caused that.
I'll give you 3. The entire rotation of the fiscal management staff, the entire rotation of the HR management staff, including, in both cases, including everybody that knew anything about our current system and had to be retrained. That's huge. And the certainly last but not least is the challenges that we've had in the procurement system and what it's taken to get people up to speed with the new system. So those three things have been huge factors. And COVID obviously didn't help any of that. You know, things have just taken a lot longer when you're doing everything remote. In many cases, as you all know, people are doing things remote for the first time in their lives. So those are huge impacts. I can't.
Last spring, we knew about this head count, and we were talking about. We all knew that the HR director was being brought into criminal actions, and all kinds of other things were taking place. These are not surprises last year. This is all stuff that was already well within the planning stage. And when you're giving,
and then I would take a contrary position on that, just if I could. That rotation in the HR staff occurred, not just the director, but I'm talking about the level below that. That entire staff rotated over. That all happened in the last 6 months. Okay, and that you can't discount that. I'm not trying to whine and make excuses, but you just can't discount the impact of that kind of thing. Last but not least, there certainly, we lost and had to replace a number of ERP staff members in the process as well. Now, and that's why there's this heavy emphasis on recruiting and getting the right people in here. We think we finally have accomplished that, but that has taken some time as well. So,
Well, good luck on recruiting. I would think that it's going to be a challenge to get people to want to stay on on a project of this nature at this point in time.
it is, but we have been successful, and as I had mentioned on the previous slide, I'm very grateful for the fact that a lot of us on the ERP team spent our holidays, talking to people and making arrangements to get them on board. We've got 3 employees and 3 1099 contractors, and we've been able to do that and save by going 1099 direct as opposed to going through a third party. And so I've done a lot of recruiting in my life, and so we can go direct here and know how to interview people and get them on board. That has actually saved the county an incredible amount of money because we're not paying what normally is about a 30% margin for contractors in those cases. So we have been successful. I'm not saying it's been easy, and there is a lot of publicity out there that works against us, but I think we're beginning to make some progress against those, that discussion that's out in the marketplace. So.
Well, we truly are between a rock and a hard spot. So thank you.
Yes, sir. Agreed. Okay. The next piece, after we finish parallels, the last thing that happens before go live here, one of the last things that happens is user acceptance testing for workforce management. Now, given that our assumption, and I think it's a valid one, is that if we're going to find any problems in the system, it's probably, excuse me, probably not going to be with how we calculate payroll. As we go through these parallels, if we identify an issue, it's probably going to be in the area of how we handle time. In some scenario, even though we literally have run all 900 or so scenarios in integrated system test environment, and we're going to run through parallel testing, we're going to find something. I don't know what it is, but we'll find something that we haven't identified before. And we want to make sure that we fix that and that we fix it before we do the contractual obligation that Infor has, which is called user acceptance testing, so-called UAT. And so that's the very last piece that we're going to go through, because that's and then we'll do that contractual acceptance, make sure that we've touched all the right bases, we've corrected anything that needed to be corrected before we actually start down the track of making the last go live. Okay. This is the same kind of a sequence, but more time it takes in the schedule for the actual training for go live. Again, to emphasize, we're training 800 supervisors, about 7,200 employees in addition to that, total of about 8,000 people. I already mentioned supervisors are going to get much more extensive training. And we're really working on our methodology. I'm not going to sit here and say that we have every answer on how to really do this in the slickest possible way. What I can tell you is I'm talking to a lot of professional training organizations. We're looking for Infor's input. We're also talking to organizations that do this kind of training for a living. And organizations, there are people out there that have done specifically training in WFM as a key part of their skill set. So we're going to look very broadly at this and make sure that when we do that training for go live, we've got all the right pieces in place to make sure that we cover this correctly. So that's what this block on the schedule is. Then the actual go live, which we talked about, the go live schedule is December the 19th, we start entering time. January 1st, we close out that period. And January the 7th, we issue the first checks. The go live decision, the go/no-go decision for go live would be back on December the 3rd, well in advance of when we obviously start the cutover. I'm sorry, was there, ma'am, was there a question or?
No, just Friday, December 3rd for your live decision. I would hope that that decision will be nothing but go live.
I would certainly hope so as well, but you got to have that decision block on the chart, so that's when it would occur.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
Mr. Ryan, you can bet your job on that?
Yes, sir. I
Okay.
would.
Good, thank you. Second time I heard
Go
that.
on record with that.
Second time you're on record doing that.
Okay. So, as we've shown on the very first chart in this sequence here, the last thing that needs to be implemented as part of this phase 1 group is budgeting, forecasting, and management. And it's specifically, we've implemented the first 2 phases of that. It's in use within OBM now. The last piece is labor budgeting. And what labor budgeting does is it takes all of the hourly detail for across the county, across the entire organization, all of that detail that's going to be sitting in workforce management, and it brings that detail into the BFM system, the budgeting system, the new budgeting system, and allows for analysis, labor analysis of all different kinds. And that's not been, we've obviously not been able to implement that piece because we didn't have that detail, and it's dependent upon the implementation of WFM. What is different here, given the length of time that we now have between now and go live, we can start we don't have to wait until WFM is live to do this. All we have to do is wait until we get through the first parallel and have data coming out of the first parallel. All those hours that people are going to be entering in that parallel can be brought over and used as test data to try to go through and build the interfaces and the data extracts to make this work, so that when we finally get to go live in payroll and workforce management, BFM will follow very shortly behind it. So it won't take long. A lot of the work, as you can see from here, the design work, I just want to point it out by leaving this part of the chart open. We're about 50% done with the data extract definitions and interface definitions already. So that work will be able to continue, and it'll really pick up speed once we get the first parallel under our belt and can give the data to the developers and the IT staff to work with, and start working with Walter and his group to finish this piece off. So we'll be testing this well in advance of our go live of payroll. Okay. Any questions before we move into finances?
yes.
Yes, sir.
I have a couple questions, but I'm first going to check with my colleagues and see if any of my colleagues have questions.
Chair, the only question that I have, I guess, is in the reverse of what we're in now. Is there any concern or any delays when we finally come back under one roof, when all the remote learning is now brought in and that conversion from out of office to in office happens? Do you see, any adjustments to your schedule that might interrupt, what you're doing in order to get payroll smoothly through? Is there going to be a seamless transition in your opinion?
Well, I'm not sure about seamless, but I don't think I would probably never claim that when you move people in and out of this situation. But I would say this: I don't see an impact of if people come back to work, depending on when that is and what the scenario is. I wouldn't see that as having a negative impact on our project schedule. If anything, I think it could be positive. The good news, I guess, from an overall technology standpoint, is that we have. The IT department has been working through the process of providing laptops to just about everybody out there. So people coming back to work, it should be fairly seamless because a lot of people coming back to work will be using the same device they've been using at home. They're just going to plug it into a new network or back into the original network, not a new network, I guess. Okay.
Right. Okay, just kind of looking ahead for
Yes,
any
ma'am.
other, quirks that could stall the project, and it sounds like you don't think that this will. So,
I don't believe that would be one of them.
thank you.
Okay. Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman.
So Director, I note that 3/1/21, which is 4 weeks from today, is the day you have set out for the start of the first parallel. And my question is, how important is that of a benchmark of our progress, and what things have to be done during those 4 weeks between today and that date so that we're ready to go at that time?
Well, the things that have to be done are those things that were under that title of this, that the first slide called parallel preparation. Okay. So we have to have, that's probably one of the most important things that we have to accomplish is because parallels are a production-like cutover. It means we have to have all of the pieces in place to be able to do that. So there's significant development pieces that just need to be closed out, discussions that we need to have before that happens. I realize the actual parallel doesn't start, the cutover and the work, the training for that parallel starts first part of March. So we need to be starting down that track, but the actual entry of payroll doesn't start until April the 11th. Just, I wanted to point that out. So we're not entering payroll hours or employee hours on March the 1st. We're starting down that whole process of setting up for that parallel, and it starts with training, then moves to the data cutover. So we have some time left to finish all of those technical pieces that need to be in place. And I mentioned it, I'm making the assumption that the people that we think we've recruited, we're going to get. I'll be in front of Border Control with at least 3 of the 1099 contractors, and we have the employees that have already signed on, those kind of things. So that's key as well. But I'm confident with that.
So, how much give is there in the schedule between March 1 and April 11th? If you get started a little bit late on March 1, is there flexibility to handle that?
There is. We've been fairly conservative about the way we've done the estimating for this. So there's, I don't know if I want to put a number on it, but there is some flex in the schedule. Yes, sir.
Okay, and my other question is about what else is going to be going on this year besides WFM and payroll? Are the things that we had originally planned to be in phase 2 that we wouldn't start on until after payroll and WFM are up and running? Is all of that stuff going to be deferred until next year, or are there some elements of those things that we're going to be working on simultaneously during 2021?
Right. So some of the things that we had planned for this year, and I have not gone back. The whole focus, let me just say, the whole focus of our team has been on trying to get this schedule worked as the first priority. That said, we have the other key things that were part of activities that we wanted for this year. We're going to be the rollout of, for example, of accounts payable to non-executive agencies and other departments so that they could be more self-sufficient. Another piece of the rollout was going to be the rollout to non-executive agencies to maintain their own employee data in GHR. If I took those two things, those were 2 of the key things that we had for this year. The rollout of GHR maintenance, the global human resources employee data maintenance, by non-executive agencies is in the payroll plan, actually, because we thought it was so important that they be self-sufficient. We put it in this plan, the one that we've been reviewing today. So that will get accomplished as part of this year's goal. The one thing that we'll have to work on the schedule, and we have not tried to revise the schedule at this point, is the rollout of accounts payable to other non-executive agencies. That one we will depend upon two things. As long as we're at full strength in the ERP team and can provide the right technical support, we'll be able to support that rollout. The second thing is a lot of the responsibility for working with those other non-executive agencies will fall within the fiscal department itself, and a lot of their availability will affect our ability to do that. The third thing that actually is a factor here that I hadn't mentioned at all is that a positive thing is that we, in some cases, for some of these agencies that have their own network, it's been very difficult. They have connectivity issues with between their network and our network and the ERP system. We've got a solution for that through Amazon Web Services. AWS has provided a solution that we're in the final stages of testing that will eliminate those problems, and that'll make it even easier to bring these folks on board. So I think we've got a good chance of completing several of the goals that we put in place for this year in parallel with this, as long as we can keep our staff at full strength.
Okay, thanks very much. Please proceed.
Okay. Moving on to program finances. This is the current state of program finances at this point. It shows you on the top, shows you the last several months, starting in August, I guess, of what the totals have been, and moving into what's being quoted here. The totals are as of the December 31st statement. We haven't closed out January yet, but the forecasts are accurate that are associated with this. So we closed out December. I'm sorry, we closed out November with a overall program balance of $34,447,629. We are, because of the extension and to cover the things that we need to cover, we have added to that the employee capitalization cost. So the current program position would be $581,019 over our current appropriated balance. So we are requesting an additional appropriation for that amount. That is a little bit less than previously discussed with some council members before this brief. I would point out that, as the slide says, that of that total, 496,000 is of our total presentation here for this extension is devoted to employee staff capitalization, which is part of the accounting process, but not something that affects anything in the general budget. It's just moving funds related to employees that are working on ERP into the capital budget. So it doesn't we're not having to go out for additional funds for that. So I think that's an important distinction there. Any questions on this slide? Okay, moving on. Attempting to move on. All right, so what does that additional appropriation cover? Just at a high level here, it covers getting the ERP core team to full strength to better support the implementation. It makes sure that we are able to retain our key contractors to support the implementation. I've allowed for an estimated amount for that professional training assistance that I talked about. Depending on exactly where we decide to go with that and who we decide to go with, I think we need help in that arena. And so we've allowed some part of the budget for that. It does, as I've already pointed out, it does cover the additional estimated, employee capitalization forecast. We have a very detailed forecast we maintain on that for every single employee that we think is going to be working or that we plan to have working on ERP. And it provides additional support for Infor to support us in areas that are not part of their current contract. There are areas where we need their assistance, and there'll be some change orders related to that were listed in the previous slide, so that we have estimates on now. So those are all the things that cause us to ask for an additional appropriation. As far as Infor goes, I wanted to point out that we have been working with Infor. Normally, what this slide essentially says is that from a contractual point of view, pure just the way the contract is written, technically Infor has delivered virtually all of workforce management and all of payroll, and they could walk away and come and say, we'll be back when you guys are ready to go live, and they wouldn't have to do anything. But that's not in our best interest, and honestly, they want to see us succeed as much as we want to succeed. So we have a proposed agreement that we'll be bringing to council to change. It's a $0 agreement. First of all, their Infor is not charging us for the extension, okay? But what we want to do is change the payment terms. Instead of paying Infor at the very end of the contract when all the deliverables are done, we would spread that payment over the next 12 months, and they would keep their 4 key people engaged through that entire period so that we have access to them and so they can help us through all the different things that we just finished talking about in the schedule that we need to have done. So in other words, we would take this $1.1 million of remaining deliverables and spread the payment over a 12-month period. So the only thing that would change in our contract, and it's a change order that we'll bring to the council, would be the payment terms, not the payment amount. Okay. Any questions on that?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Councilman Tuma.
Thank you.
Yes.
Just a quick question as far as the terms of that payment go. How does that benefit us in that contract agreement? How does that benefit the county by doing that?
Well, that's certainly a logical question. Well, like I said, if the contract is deliverables based from Infor, which means that if they don't have any deliverables, if we were to take the remaining deliverables and look at those deliverables, that the remaining deliverables they have in this area wouldn't really occur until we go live. It's cut over. It's a lot of things related to the very end of the project. Technically, they wouldn't have to keep people available during this period of time based on the way the contract is written. By doing it this way, Infor agrees to keep their folks engaged, not full-time, okay? And we don't need them full-time, but we need access to them, and we need the same people consistently supporting us. Realize some of these folks have worked with this payroll program. I could name some consultants that work with this thing from the very beginning. It would be an incredible loss if we were to rotate somebody out and then bring back a different person. So it allows us to maintain consistency of staff and access throughout the entire period, which they wouldn't by contract necessarily have to do, but they're willing to do this because they want us to be successful as much as we do.
Yeah, my only concern is that they get paid and then they walk once they get paid.
Well, by contract, they'd have a problem because they wouldn't have completed their deliverables. So we still have access from a legal standpoint. We certainly have leverage from that standpoint. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, because if you wait to pay them at the end, they have to do their work in order to get their money.
Right.
Okay, I'll take your word on it. Since this project's gone so well, I'll take
Well, we have delivered a lot. We just haven't delivered everything at this point. I hear you. Though. Yes,
Just not on time and under budget.
Yes, sir.
Jack,
Okay.
if I may ask, Chair, if you would allow me a question.
Yes, you may proceed.
Does Infor take any responsibility for the delay?
By and large, the delays are on our side. There's certainly things that we work together on that I'd say where it's appropriate, they have taken responsibility, but not all of the delay is on their side. I think we certainly, because of all the things we just talked about, a lot of that falls within the county. A lot of that falls on because of circumstances that neither party could predict. So.
Right, and even on Infor's side, did they also have those type of turnovers in people? And of course, the pandemic, I'm sure, wasn't there equally some issues on their end that may have delayed what we're trying to do with this ERP payroll?
There's been a few things, and again, there's been probably a few things that have happened there, but not, they've been pretty consistent for example, the people that we've had involved in, if I just go through the key people, which is what this is all about on their side, the gentleman that supported finance, is still supporting finance. Okay. We've had the same persons from the very beginning, and that's been incredibly important. He's currently even assisting us with closing right now. The person that's involved with payroll has been the same person consistent throughout. I would not want to lose her at this point in time, because that would be an incredible amount of sort of institutional knowledge about how our system is configured for our staff to lose. So that consistency of staff is really important to us right now. It would hurt if we rotated somebody at this point.
But you're putting the delays solely, for the most part, with maybe a few minor exceptions, on the county, not on Infor.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
So, Director, I have a question, and harking back to the previous financial slide, you had two components that added to the appropriation amount. There was the $1,006,000 of additional contract support, and then there was the 496,000 or so of county staff resources that we would spend anyway, but is now being included as part of the capital cost. And focusing on the first of those, am I correct in assuming that since you're saying that the Infor contract adjustment is a no dollar amount contract, that this $1,006,000 is other contracts? And if so, could you give me a breakdown of what those are for?
Yes, sir. The breakdown is on, let me go back to that slide since we're talking about it, if I may. Give me just a moment. Oops. So the breakdown is here in the lower left-hand side of all the different things that make up that total amount. And these are forecasted amounts, hopefully conservatively forecasted on our part. So if I go down that list, the Chris Triplett contract is a key WFM consultant that not Infor. It's one that we've contracted directly with. The person that actually came over from the Mainsail contract at one point to extend him all the way through the implementation of workforce management.
So how much money is that one for?
That's $257,000.
Okay, I see it.
Yes, sir. Okay. So I'm just going down that, I'm sorry, that list right here.
So it looks like there are some N4 items on this list, so.
Yes, sir.
Are those going to require change orders that do have dollar amounts attached?
If we execute those change orders, I'm using the term if here, these are estimated amounts. And if we execute these, they would require change orders to come to Board of Control. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Well, that completes the formal part of my presentation. Are there any other questions from council members or the chair?
Okay, well, hearing none, I appreciate your presentation. It's not all good news, but I think you gave us a good understanding of what the challenges are and how you're trying to deal with them. I'm also encouraged that I think the new schedule on WFM and payroll is not as tightly scheduled. I think it has a little bit more flexibility in it. So I have a greater degree of optimism that we can execute on the schedule and certainly have a high degree of an intentionality that hopefully we can accomplish that. So we will schedule another briefing in a couple months, and hopefully at that time the parallel testing will be underway, and we appreciate the update.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so that completes the items on our schedule except for miscellaneous business, and I would just like to ask my colleagues if you would kind of hold open Monday, February 22nd. That's the day before a council meeting. It's a Monday where more typically we wouldn't meet, but we may meet on things that are not legislation related. We may do the Harris project on that day, and if the administration is able to do so, we might do the 2020 actuals on that day. So I would just hold that day open. We will not meet on the 15th because it's Martin Luther King Day, and we will not meet on the following Thursday, the day that the Monday normally rolls over, because I have a conflicting meeting that I have to chair at that date and time. So the 22nd would be the next earliest date for finance and budget. Is there any other miscellaneous business? Hearing none and there being nothing else that requires our attention, finance and budget stands adjourned. Thanks very much, everybody, for your time and attention.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.